Poshal Gyamba. I'm a recent graduate from Shri College of Commerce, and I've made a lot of dalgona coffees during the lockdown. How that started was that at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, my society administration had requested all the domestic workers from stop showing up to work in order to restrict the virus. While that led to a lot of adventure in the kitchen, it also meant that it started a period of uncertainty for these domestic workers. You see, they are employed on an informal basis, thus on the days they don't work, they get no pay. Now, in the advent of a 21-day lockdown, which was supposed to be extended indefinitely, and their limited savings, this caused huge distress for them and around 85% of India's workforce who is employed in the informal or the gig economy. This to me, on hearing or even speaking now, seems unfair and thus gave cue to the topic that I'm going to present today, that is the dignity of labor. What dignity of labor essentially means is that all jobs and professions are supposed to be treated equally and no occupation is supposed to be considered superior or inferior to another. This finds its way in the principles of equality, universal principle of equality, which also is a part of our fundamental rights. It also has historical and religious backings to it, where almost all religions in India talk about how if one is true to their profession and occupation, then he or she is spiritually correct and closer to God. Of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation, where he talks about how dignity of labor and respect for all occupations is essential for India to continue as a progressive society. His philosophy comes with symbols such as charkha and khaki, which we respect dearly in our society even today, and are formulated in as the directive principles of state policy in our constitution as well. But wait, why are we even discussing this? The Prime Minister of our country is essentially a chaiwala. Does that not mean that there is some sort of respect of profession that is already exhibited in our Indian society? Well, the short and unfortunate answer to that question is no. While cases such as Narendra Modi, Smriti Irani, Sonia Gandhi are exceptional cases and inspire millions by the sense of achievement that they have brought about in their lives, these are essentially first exceptional, and second, their stories are presented with a language that carries a narrative of how they have overcome something lowly, undesired, and of low value in their lives, that is essentially their menial jobs, to become this great persona. And that is what the inherent problem of prejudice is with respect to white collar and blue collar jobs, that is preventing this lack of dignity of labor in our society. White collar jobs are essentially attributed to jobs of intellectual skills such as doctors, engineers, corporate professors, etc., and blue collar jobs associated to everyday work such as menial workers, cab drivers, delivery men, etc. Now, with context to India, this is particularly more aggressive because of the lingerings of the caste systems that have historically shaped our society. In the Hindu culture was occupationally based upon an occupational caste system of 5 castes, Brahmins being the highest and Shudras being the lowest, and also being the menial workers. The white collar jobs are still attributed to a sense of elitism, which in India can also be called a sense of Brahmanism, where the intellectual work and the kind of work is considered to be outside the capacity of people working menial jobs because of their presumed incapability based on our caste systems. Now, after the World War II, however, a third category of jobs has also been added, that is called the pink collar jobs, that are attributed to jobs of related to female attributes such as jobs of receptionist, teaching, domestic care, dental assistant, librarian, etc. These have created a new phenomenon of glass ceiling effect, which allows females to progress in their professional careers to a certain extent, but only to a certain extent, and then get stopped simply because they are females. Clearly, these are based on unscientific lines of sexism in the workplace. One, this not only creates a problem of deep-rooted inequality, but at the same time, it also causes rigidity in the supply of labor, which restricts the overall development of our society at large. However, the biggest example and India's biggest failure in terms of providing dignity of labor and hence life to people is the problem of the migrant workers that we faced in the year 2020 on the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of people on the brink of the announcement of the lockdown were left without jobs, with limited savings and no sources of improvements in the future. The public distribution system of resources and welfare services was so deprived that there was no mention of it in the initial few weeks of the lockdown. And this sense of uncertainty and the actual fear of dying from hunger before the COVID-19 virus actually got them caused millions to move back from the cities to which they had migrated to rural areas and to their ancestral agricultural lands. This not only reversed the decades of development that we had slowly gone through, but it also caused deep-rooted discomfort for the people because there was no travel or transportation facilities provided by the government, and at the same time numerous incidences of irresponsible behavior such as trains driving off migrant workers resting on the railway track showed up, for which the government had no response. Now, what is worse in this situation is that when asked upon the details about these cases of misfortune, of deaths during these migrations, or the total number of people impacted, the government could not give a straightforward answer. The simple reason to it was because we lacked any kind of statistical data to supplement how many people got affected, how many people needed aid in the first place to provide that aid. Now, this is not a logistical problem. This cannot simply be attributed to the fact because of the urgency and the sudden immediate nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government cannot do this calculation. It has been over a year and the government has still not come to a reasonable conclusion or calculation for these data. But at the same time, it cannot do so because the government does not have the base data, the before the pandemic data of these informal sectors to begin with in order to prepare a comparative study between then and now. This lack of representation in government statistical data might seem very few when I speak it in one line, but it has huge implications. This shows a historical and systematic pattern of lack of representation of these sections in our policies and other forms of decision making. The lack of consideration is seen, the easiest example of this could be seen with India's vaccine diplomacy at a time when all the advanced countries of the world were implementing protectionist policies in order to create the maximum resource capabilities for their own populations and generating and investing heavily in R&D for their own population. India was freely providing subsidized and free vaccinations to other countries of the world, not once considering that it did not have enough vaccines in the first place to facilitate for its own population. A huge function of this has attributed to the fact that in the play of Indian leadership for leadership's desire for recognition and legitimacy, it has let go of the sections of society which does not go along with its image of a developed India, meaning 85% of Indian society who are considered back off, essential but back off, are let go by the government in their legal and policy frameworks. If there is no data available in the official records, that means that there is no formal tracing of their existence, and the lack of their existence would mean there would be no policy formulated for their well-being in the simplest of words. However, the pandemic has also driven us back to the Rawlsian principle of difference, which simply states that the safety of the most vulnerable of the society means the safety of everyone in the society. This is simply because the virus does not discriminate. Thus, what it means is that in order to tackle the disruptions such as the COVID-19 pandemic or any such disruptions in the future, we have to build state capabilities in order to facilitate everyone in the society, because life cannot go back to normal functioning until everyone around us can go back to normal functioning, and amongst everyone, the menial workers or the blue collar jobs will always have an essential role to play. The biggest example of this is through the pandemic. As important as the frontliners in medicine and researchers were, so were the frontline workers of essential delivery services, essential commodities, and domestic workers, cleaners, sanitation workers, and all of this has reconfirmed our beliefs that there exists an interdependentness, and it has to be addressed and is inevitable. Thus, if there has to be development, it has to be development of everyone. We need to also understand dignity of labor is not just an economic issue. It also has sociological perspectives, and that is that any occupation, the social status attached and the approval of the community at large is as significant as its economic value. What that means is that even though a job in the advertising or engineering would give the same kind of remuneration as that of driving an Uber, still college students invest so much in their education and wait years until to get a job in order to get that kind of societal approval. And the second aspect is that and this is highlighted by anthropologist E.T. Hall's study of high and low context cultures, which basically simply talks about how about rigid behavioral patterns and formations of in-groups within societies. Thus, high context cultural society is one which is a collectivist nature, whereas low context societies is one which is characterized by individualistic natures. India, he categorizes as a high context culture, which without the theoretical basis simply means that there is huge amounts of societal pressure in our culture. This can simply be understood by us in terms of the choices we have to make over of sciences over humanities, of a stable government job over anything to do with passion, about getting married early in your life when you want to when you want other options, when you want to explore other options, etc. Second is also an aspect of there is a constant conflict in our Indian society between the haves and the haves not. The ones who have continue to use these resources to contain the haves within their own mandates, and the ones who do not have are thus restricted from having these advantages so much and so forth. Now, a lot of this has been dealt theoretically in political philosophies such as Karl Marx, where he talks about false consciousness, and also the Marxian theory of value, that is how the labor theory, how physical labor should be valued almost at equals, if not more, to intellectual values, as well as Adam Smith's progress about the theory of value, where he talks about how labor is the real value in exchange, and thus any kind of capital that gets generated out of labor, thus labor has to be superior in comparison to intellectual value. However, we do not tend to contest between the two. All forms of professions need to be equally valued, and there has to be a genuine respect that needs, and considering the nature of the Indian society, any kind of transformation in this respect has to be in the mindset of the society at large. Thus, the key here is education. There is an urgent need in order to revamp our education systems to better facilitate vocational training. The best way to do this would be to instill some form of vocational training after the classes of 5th or 8th, so that students develop a sense of dignity in whatever work they are doing, as well as respect the work that other workers put into making their lives better. Now, other aspects that we need to do is, considering that India is a democracy, there is a strong need for representation. It is rightly said that in a democracy, if you are not represented correctly, so you can't put forward your demand and thus only accept denial. Thus workers need to organize better. There have to be stronger forms of organization, such as trade unions, to present their views and requirements forward, as well as constantly work towards developing their work environment. Formation of trade unions would also ensure participation in decision making at the topmost levels. What that would do would be that at the time of the decision of meetings of board of directors, trade unions can better establish the needs of the workers and thus establish policies which are more holistically developed. Because India is a labor intensive country, 52% of our work depends on labor, and with the extensive number of new youth that we are empowering into our economy, this will only grow. Thus, it is necessary to avoid a situation where someone refuses to take up a job which can be equally satisfying just because it is not a white-collar job, because it does not provide the kind of dignity the person requires, or someone who has immense capability but is restricted by the idea that he is only fixed for a blue-collar job because he does not have the so-called stigmatized capabilities of a white-collar job despite being very much qualified for it. However, there have been positive signs towards this, and while awareness is something that the government can always work for, but positive signs include that people are starting to understand that social approval is not so crucial to satisfy our basic needs. But money is, and both of them are very separate contexts. The young, educated generation of slum dwellers seem to have grasped this. There is a monumental difference in their thought process when it comes to these menial jobs and their level of awareness. What this has done is they are pursuing their academic as well as professional passions, but at the same time are equally willing to engage in menial works and think and know they deserve the kind of respect for doing what their fathers have previously done, or for not doing the same for the same reason. Based on this, while we are at a situation where we have witnessed in the past 2 years how not respecting the people who make our lives easier has resulted in a complete lack of their recognition in our systems, both at a personal level where we forget about their hardships just because they are not in our immediate visibility, as well as that transcending into our policy levels where we are unable to create policies for the betterment of the whole of society. I hope I have presented a small case of how integral it is to move everyone together, and that dignity of labor is something that does not require resources. It requires a change of aptitude, and moving forward we are able to achieve that. Thank you.